within 36 months of me making that declaration and demonstrating that I'm on it, whatever declaration that I made, it's catapulted me to be an architect, making architect money, right?
Mm-hmm.
That do it until you become it. Like I honestly believe I'm a living example of that.
We are back.
Again,
Yes, we are back again. Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know what's going on, last was it? Yeah, yesterday we did a recording and I forgot to switch on my mic. I think my mic was on, but I didn't configure it properly, so it was almost like Scott was talking to himself.
it happens.
And it kind of sucks because it reminds me of, has it ever happened to you before where you are working on a project, you made a lot of changes and everything was going well until maybe you accidentally deleted your files or you lost those changes, and now you have to rewrite code that you've written before, and it's
Yep.
almost like writing it the second time. You feel demoralized and depressed because it's like, I've written this before, why do I have to
hmm So, what's today's topic, Odie?
Yes. So today's topic is accelerating with side projects.
Accelerating with side projects. That can mean different things.
Yep.
Well,
Yep. So on one hand, it could mean like, so maybe I think you make the first case while I make the second case, like we did before.
okay.
All right.
What was that? You used a term where like when you understand the entire game, like Mario Brothers, you try to do it. You try to beat the whole game in like an
Speed
hour
run.
or 15. I feel like this episode is going to be a speed run of all the content we did yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At least the good part is that the at least we are just going to be hitting straight to the
Yeah.
point rather than beating around the bush like we did. You know.
Okay. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So, are side projects valuable? Yes. Do side projects provide a return on investment? Yes. Speaking from experience, the side projects that I've had resulted in me being the technical authority of Miami Beach, Florida, for whatever I decided that I want to be the technical authority of in Miami Beach, Florida, such as Xamarin, F Sharp, event streaming, or event streaming?
Yep.
Event
Yep.
streaming, always get event streaming, event sourcing swaps. And so the thought process is it's kind of a catch 22. If you're green, aka very junior, you're probably running into I didn't get the job because HR or employer XYZ said that I don't have experience. Well, how do you accumulate experience if you don't get the job, right? Hence the catch 22. And so my answer, and maybe it's the survey says, is you do it until you become it, right? You don't need permission to get experience from an employer. You honestly you don't rely, especially if it's an unregulated industry, you don't rely on the employer to get experience with emphasis on rely. Instead, you go through the process of what it means to manifest or create something from a sketch of your mind or in your mind, and you just make it happen. And then you go through the process of mistakes. You go through the process of, yeah, that probably wasn't a good decision. I should have did it this way. And as you're going through that process of, man, that wasn't ideal the way I did that part. And that part, I really should have done this part, and blah, blah, blah. As you go through different stages, guess what that is? It's experience. I would like to define experience as things that you now know what not to do to achieve the same objective, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really need an employer to build a cross platform mobile app. You don't need an employer to purchase Azure credits and try to build a real-time chat system. You don't need an employer for any of that. All you need is maybe some money to pay for the cost of whatever technology, or computing cost, and you need consistency. I'll pause right there.
No, no, like it's you're absolutely right. You know, you don't have the so what tends to happen is that most developers, their careers are shaped by their employment, right? So it's whatever their current boss is, whatever technology stack that their current employer is using, that's the current stack that they learn. They don't have the breadth of experience, right, with the industry and stuff like that. And it's even kind of it's even really bad for people who work in like very very specialized organizations where maybe the frameworks they use in that organization is specific to what they do, and they don't use like, or they use a lot of proprietary or in-house technologies and tools, right? The downside with that is that it means that when such developers leave those companies and go to other companies, they are almost gimped in a way, right? Because they don't understand, maybe they don't have experience with the technology that is being widely adopted in the industry and stuff like that. So imagine you work for a company who does who uses a custom operating system, for example, to do all their deployments, like the US military, for example, right? Then it means that even if you have like 10 years experience working for that employer, when you get a job in a different company where they use maybe Linux, for example, you are going to have to struggle quite a bit, right? Because your career has been molded to your employment history. But having side projects allows you to sidestep that, right? It allows you to get experiences in areas that you want to pursue, right? Areas you find rewarding, right? And yeah, that's also very very valuable.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
yeah.
just gonna
So
say, I
okay,
was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say in what we had recorded yesterday that I think, um, belongs in this video as well is when you're picking a side project. Yes, there's return in investment in picking status quo, right? What is very popular and standardized in the industry, you really can't go wrong with that. However, take into consideration that to establish yourself as an outlier, you going down that path isn't going to catapult you to being an outlier. It's going to make you no different from everybody else. There's still value in it, right? But it's not separating you from the herd. It's not making you an outlier. This is where perhaps you could take consideration of, okay, how do I, with this side project, how can I make this the best investment of my time possible? How can I kill as many birds with one stone, or multiple birds with one stone, by me investing this time in the side project? And one thing that I would add is challenge yourself with that side project to leverage a shift in paradigm to accommodate whatever that objective is of your side project. So, for example, I've learned, Odie, that can you believe it? That your standard enterprise developers, when you use the term event stream and you put in some diagram and provide technical guidance for them to consider using an event stream in the architecture for whatever system that needs to be built, it kind of becomes a glaze in their eyes. They're like, I don't understand. What do you mean? Why can't we just do CRUD? And since I've picked up event streaming, um, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it is a tool in my toolbox. And unfortunately for me, it's kind of a default tool until I can make a credible argument that it's over engineering, which it can be, right? Depending on like how simple the project is. But it has taught me some valuable, for lack of a better term, uh, standards to maintain, such as immutability. And when you have a series of events that are time stamped and they have other types of meta data attached to those events, that you can it's useful to build some tools for it, right? So when you're building out this infrastructure or ecosystem, relying on a stream of events or a collection of events versus just throwaway updates, meaning when I say throwaway, you update a system, but you have no clue what the past history of that system was, and you have no clue what the catalyst or the trigger for why it updated in the first place.
Mm.
It becomes more challenging to build tooling around that if there's less context to go around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to summarize, when considering a side project, consider leveraging an alternative technique that isn't necessarily mainstream that will give you the advantage of solve or of providing a solution using different paradigms, which will separate you from the herd in regards to how valuable you could be to a team or to a business.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that. It's like the catch 22 in a way, right? In order to be accepted, you have to do what everybody is doing. But your goal isn't really to be accepted. Your goal is to be an outlier, like you said. But if you are too much of an outlier, you become an outcast, right? So you need to exactly. So you need to straddle that line between being part of the culture but still being away from the culture, which doesn't kind of make sense. But it's pretty much what you just laid out right there. Is look for techniques and tools that aren't necessarily mainstream, but will give you like an advantage or an edge, right? But at the same time, you can't just go all crazy and start using a language like Prolog, for example. Even though Prolog has some very good ideas in it, but there's something as too outlier. There's something as being too much of an outlier versus being somewhat of an outlier, but still relatable in a way to regular developers. Which, yeah, it sounds contradictory, but yeah, that's the reality of it. One of the things I remember we talked about, and that still applies here as well, is even if you're not a junior developer, because I can imagine that there are some senior developers that are watching this stream and thinking to themselves, yeah, I'm a senior developer, I'm a SDM or whatever in XYZ company, and I don't see why I need to have a side project. And the answer I normally give is, or like I gave in the previous episode was in previous recording was like, look, you need to have a side project. In fact, it's critical as a technical manager that you have a side project, because what tends to happen is you see this happen all the time. Architects who just live in the stratosphere, who their ideas are never brought down to reality. They have never implemented anything in the past 5 years, for example. So whatever designs they are coming with, right, or how they think things should be done, right, has no bearing with reality whatsoever. And the funny part with architecture is that architecture is this thing that must be done in any project. But somehow architects feel, or developers feel like the architects are in a different um they like there's this divide between the developers and the architects, right? And what mostly causes that divide is when someone who becomes a manager, who probably has been coding for a while, has a lot of experience, has a lot of knowledge, and then gets into a senior, quote unquote, senior position, and stays in that senior position for like 5 years, 10 years. And the person has no contact with, no understanding of what the learnings are, that, in terms of actual technical ability and stuff like that. And a side project helps you deal with that knowledge, right? Like, I know very senior people who, when I was starting out as a software engineer, who maybe changed jobs or whatever and tried to get back to becoming a developer, and it was so difficult for them because now they missed the entire JavaScript era, right? They missed the whole jQuery, Angular, and stuff like that. So coming back into front end, they're totally lost, right? And having a side project prevents that, because if you have a side project that you're working on, you get to play around with these technologies and keep your skills fresh, right? So from that perspective, all right, let's hear it.
But Odie, my life is busy. Like I got relationships, I have hobbies. I don't really have time to make time for a side project when I'm already working like 50 hours a week. I got kids. I got a wife that's probably preparing to sick the state on me and have alimony and child support. Like I don't have time for all this. Like this isn't realistic, Odie.
Well, the question is, so I agree, but at the same time, you have to make out time to get out of that rat race, right? Like I could give you an example. When we first met 5 years ago, um, if not more than, I was working at a 9 to 5 job as a software developer, which became a senior technical lead and all of that stuff. And I was being paid the equivalent of, I don't know, in today's money would be like, I don't know, $300 or $400 per month, not per hour, per month. Um, and I remember being so stressed because I was working from morning to night. In fact, what used to happen then was I would spend the whole day meeting with other stakeholders in the company and all this kind of stuff, having conversations about how the code should be built and all the stuff, what the requirements are, and so on and so forth, while the team is working during the day. And then once it's 5 o'clock, right? That's when I would now start, doing code reviews and all that other stuff. It was hell. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a dead end, right? If I now, granted, the money at the time, because I was living in Nigeria at the time, right? The money at the time could still take care of my basic necessities, but I wasn't anywhere like wealthy or rich or anything like that. And I remember meeting myself that, look, you are in a death spiral, right? You could do this for 25 years and you will make zero progress. So I had to force myself to still expand, still take out time, right? Still look for extra time, even if it's 12 in the midnight or 11 o'clock or something like that, to do other things, like maybe write a blog post on Medium or reach out to the F Sharp community or learn, be part of the F Sharp community, be more active on Twitter and stuff like that. And truth of the matter is, like, my life is like, in fact, I think everybody's life is like that, like this equalizer, where you have different knobs for the different things in your life, right? You have a knob for family, you have a knob for your job, you have a knob for your personal life, you have a knob for your hobbies, and so on and so forth. And anytime you move one knob to the extreme, right, it lowers the others. But in a way, I think it's a sacrifice that you need to make. Otherwise, you will just be in that spiral forever, right? So with those effort I was putting on the side, even though that was a sacrifice I made then, the payoff started to accrue on itself, to where I am today.
So this is how I manage it.
Okay.
I integrate it into my lifestyle, right?
Mm,
So as a man, there's things that are just absolutely vital in order to maximize your time on this earth. Uh, with emphasis on your time on this earth because it runs out after a while. It's health, maybe building attraction, like sexual attraction, mating, whatever. Right. So health, mating, and earning a lifestyle. So money, attraction, health. Those are the three at least that we need to be masters of. I'm master of neither. But with that said, how do you integrate that, right? So we're
mm,
again, the context is a side project. Side project is accelerating your growth. If you accelerate your growth, in theory, you're accelerating the your value or your worth. And if you're accelerating your value and your worth, well, in the marketplace, in theory, they're willing to pay more, right? In theory. So what does this mean? You only have 24 hours in a day, and you of those 24 hours, you probably need 4 hours to sleep minimum. But then you have a 40-hour job, maybe even 50. You have other people, you have other things. You may even have like me have caught a case and you're going back and forth between lawyers and court, whatever. What do you do, right?
mm,
What works for me is I have some I have some earbuds, right? Are they in the case right now? Yeah, they're in the case right now. I have these. These for me are core to integrating my how I need to earn a living 6 months from now to what I need to all the fires I need to put out every day. I literally go through life in the morning. If I'm working out, I'm preparing for my side project. I am YouTubing instructional videos on event streaming or whatever latest greatest framework that I am likely to be using on my side project in T minus 3 weeks. I am onboarding educational information as I am working out, or I'm commuting back and forth,
mm,
or I'm eating. It's how can I integrate as much as I can so that it's not a huge separation of one task to another, hence context switching. And that kind of works out for me. If I can absorb information in parallel of doing mundane everything else that's required, and there's really no opting out of day-to-day tasks, it it's a huge contributor
mm,
versus trying to isolate. Okay, let me just focus on this side project, which leads me to the other part. When I'm not in parallel absorbing information about this side project or what's related to the side project, I usually set aside 1 hour minimum of personal study, meaning maybe not so much on the weekends, but Monday through Friday, it is no different from my 40 hours a week, where whether it's 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, I have at least 1 hour to focus on my personal growth within, well, for my professional practice, right? If it's some framework that's going to take me a while to really learn, like if I was approaching Kubernetes, which I know nothing about, right? What I would do is for likely the next 3 to 4 weeks, I would dedicate an hour every morning, Monday through Friday, on either running to Kubernetes instructional video on YouTube, bicycling to it, commuting to it, and writing some code snippets and blogging about what I discovered or whatever technical issue that I resolved. Um, and then I document that on Stack Overflow as well. Like integrate, integrate, integrate. Once you figure out something that you just didn't know how to push through, uh, I don't know, the day before, like reinforce that, document it, Stack Overflow, document it in your personal or in your technical journal, aka blog, and you're just integrating as much as you can. So I know I said a
mm.
lot, but that's
No, no, no.
what I practice.
It's very valuable advice, and in fact, I kind of I also did the same thing as well. So I remember, if you remember when we first met, I used to tell you about how I used to have like 2 hour commutes, sorry, 4 hour commutes every day, right? So that's 2 hours going, 2 hours going back, and I remember during that period sitting inside a bus all the way in Lagos, Nigeria, having to watch like video tutorials on my phone, right? I didn't even have good internet at the time. So what used to happen was I would download these videos from Pluralsight or something, have them offline on my phone and just be watching them. And I remember doing that for like almost 2 years, and I learned a lot. In fact, that's how I learned F sharp. That's how I read Don Syme's book, Expert F sharp. Was every time while I was in commute for 2 hours straight, like I wasn't going anywhere anyway. I would use that opportunity to learn. And like you rightly said, one of the for me though, like one of the biggest investments I ever made, right, based on my side project that ended up paying off really, really well, was learning F sharp, right? Not only did it get me my first out of the country gig, right, but it also opened up many, many opportunities. I got to talk to Don Syme. I got to present on .NET conferences. I got to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done otherwise, you know. So yeah, that's very very powerful. One other thing I would like us to also discuss and talk about is it's important you have not just a side project for side project's sake, right? Like, oh, I have a side project to do XYZ, and I'm using this opportunity to learn some technical skills, right? But it's also a good idea to have a side business, right? Because as once the checks are being signed by you, once you have to pay for your cloud infrastructure, it's a completely different mindset from, oh, I'm working for this employer and I don't care if I have to use. In fact, I don't even know the difference in prices between any of the different Azure resources, right? I don't know the difference in price between EKS or ECS, and I really don't care. I just use whatever I like. But when it's your own side business, when you are the one responsible for the marketing, the development, the branding, the everything of a particular business, it's a different mindset because it helps you see end to end how to think of a concept and how to get that concept all the way to production into the hands of people. And I would argue that if you are someone who is in a leadership role in a company, that knowledge is super critical because most times in big companies, different aspects are handled by different people. So you know that, okay, there is a security aspect of our platform and it's handled by the security team. We don't even know what goes on with the security team, right? That's a completely different case if you are responsible for the security of your side business, quote unquote, right? Like recently, Linus Tech Tips got hacked, where he got hacked by some hackers. They used his channel to do some crypto stuff and it got taken down, and you could tell that he was so distraught by it. But the point I'm trying to get at is that he he was someone he has a lot of knowledge in so many things, including
What were we talking
security.
about?
Linus Tech Tips, one of the biggest YouTubers, you know
Okay.
him. Yeah,
No.
and yeah, he has all that knowledge now because he has to manage a YouTube channel, he has to manage the security of his business, so he has that broad understanding. And I think it's more critical, even if you don't plan to start your own, even if you don't plan to take your business seriously, right? Starting a side business is very, very powerful. It will even help you in gaining a large breadth of experience, which would even help you even in your main place of employment.
I completely agree, and that's something that we discussed in the lost recordings, right? That they're going to find in the cave 500 years from now. Is yeah, what I've learned because I'm doing my own personal startup just to see if it's a viable business. And to your point, it is constraining me. It is forcing me to prioritize, and it is constraining me slash forcing me to take a methodical, staged approach. I think a lot of us developers, we we think that things are just big bang, right?
Mm,
Here's the project. Okay, well, how many teams do we have in the department? We got 3 teams. Okay, 3 teams, one project, and there's no. Tell me if you've been in an environment like that where there's no analysis for the development effort. It's just how many developers we have. Here's the project. All right, assign them stuff, right? Um, Something that I was forced to realize is when you're trying to conceive a business,
mm.
you have skin in the game, and you're likely not just investing your time, right, which is obviously valuable. You don't get that back. You don't get your time back.
True.
What you can get is a return on investment, which is you spend money, and in theory, if you do it right, you get more money back, right? When you start spending money, you start taking things more seriously, right? We get into
Yeah.
a habit as developers or as employees in general of not considering the cost of our decisions, the cost of how we do things. We don't care. How many architects, quote unquote, architects or lead developers, how often do they provide a a strategy, or they provide direction for, okay guys, this is how we're going to do it, or gals, we're going to do this, that, and that, right? But it's not backed up by, well, what's the cost of that procedure? What's the cost? Has there been any cost analysis based on what you're about to corral a group of developers and testers and other agents to do? And 98% of the time, they don't consider the eight fallacies of distributed computing. They don't consider, again, from the video that we did yesterday, CAP theorem. Let me try to remember CAP: consistency, availability, and partitioning. I don't remember the suffix of that.
Partition tolerance.
Partition tolerance.
Yeah,
Okay. And like, we're not going to go into the details of what the eight fallacies of distributed computing are, nor are we going to go into the details of CAP theorem, but they're extremely relevant when you're making decisions. Um,
absolutely.
and so I know I said a lot, but just to summarize, when you're investing your own money, all of a sudden you're constrained to, you're encouraged to start thinking about the burn rate of the money that you're spending as it comes out of your personal bank account or savings account. And you're not really going to experience that um, with an employer, but you're getting firsthand experience with your own side project, thus making you more valuable. And now here's something that I've noticed with a lot of leaders in the development organizations that I enter is they're very quote unquote tactical, but they're not strategic. They don't plan the development effort, and they don't plan for the short term consequences, let alone long term consequences, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 3 years from now. They don't consider the lifespan of the system that they're working on. Um, and I would argue that when you're spending your own money and you really need to get that return on investment, else why are you doing it in the first place? You're thinking about a lot of things, including the future, and you're trying to build so it scales, at least long term. That's not the highest priority when you're doing a side project, thinking about the long term strategy, but it's a seed that you need to routinely consider
Mm.
on a routine schedule. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more because you, like you said, there is when you are responsible for paying for a particular, like when it's coming out of your pocket, whether you're paying engineers or you are paying for infrastructure or something like that, you are forced to be, what's the word, frugal, right, with your choices. And sometimes, and what in my experience tends to happen, I think that's even a law, is, the same, necessity is the mother of invention, right? You find out that true innovation doesn't actually just happen. True innovation comes out of limitations, right? So when you have this constraint on you, you are constrained by the number of developers on your team, you're constrained by how much money you can spend and all of that stuff. You are forced to innovate. And sometimes that innovation can produce orders of magnitude more, what's the word? Orders of magnitude more return on investment versus if you didn't have those initial constraints in the first place. You get what I mean? So yeah, it's absolutely that.
is there anything that we didn't cover? Either
Uh,
that we forgot in the that we went over in the last video that we lost, that we need to cover in this one
no, no, I think we covered everything. We did.
from the last video? Okay.
Yeah.
In addition to the last video, is there anything else that we need to cover on this topic of side projects? We talked
No.
about
Okay.
opportunity costs. I think we talked about opportunity costs and
Yep.
consider integrating
Mm-hmm.
what you currently do with with a side project that's going to help you grow to the next level, both in income and awareness. Uh, what else? What else? What else? You're encouraged to prioritize. You're encouraged to strategize. Um, I feel like we're missing something. We talked. You brought out the good point of you want to be an outlier, but you don't want to be an outcast. That's new to me. I never
Mm.
considered that. Um, okay, here's one, and I don't think I'm like just reaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a is there a minimum and maximum duration projected for a side project?
Um,
Is it okay to have a side project that is 5 hours? Is it okay to have a side project that is 5 years? Like what is a side project?
well, I think side projects fall into three main categories, right? So there's the first side project, which is what I would call a throwaway side project, right? That that could be 5 hours, like you said. It could be maybe 5 days. The goal of those side projects is just to see how a particular technology works, right? You just want to, maybe if it's Kubernetes, you have an idea, you execute on the idea just for 5 days. I think that should be the maximum. You shouldn't spend 3 months on it, right? Then there is the okay, so the first one is side project. I can call the one side viable project, right? So this one is probably a library, right, or a framework, or a a platform that you're building. You don't know if it's going to be a business or not. It's just a cool idea you have, right? It's the type that shows up in things like hackathons, for example. Maybe they call you for a hackathon, you come and you show off this nifty idea. Those ones are the ones I'll call side viable projects, right? And the third ones are the side businesses, right? This is a good idea you had during a fever dream in the middle of the night, and you are sure it's going to take the world by storm, and you are ready to invest all your time and energy into it. And you can see it becoming your full-time job, right? So that's a side business. Now, side businesses, I don't think there's any limit to how long you can do them, because it all depends on how much time you are able to, afford to the side business, right? Um, yeah. So I think those are so a good way to think about it is 6 months to 6 days for side project. 6 days, sorry, I said 6 hours to 6 days for side projects, then 6 months for side viable projects, and then up to 6 years for side business, I think.
Okay.
Mm.
The, the next question, which I had it and then I lost it, was come back, come back, come back. Uh, what's the outcome of a side project? What's the
Mm.
deliverable?
So
So for a
yeah,
for a minimal viable side project, what is the deliverable of it? Is it, oh, I wrote some code on the editor, it works. Is that the deliverable?
no, I think for those ones, the deliverable is to have an application, right? That's the deliverable of the side of the first one, which is the side projects, right? So
I would add on to that.
yeah, a deliverable here is just something that was executable. So if I decide to do a side project on a game, I want to build a game, right? I may spend the first 3, 4 hours learning about game design and stuff like that. I could learn a few stuff, but at the end of the day, for me, in my opinion, right, the deliverable of a side project should be, oh, I've done this little executable. You double click it, it runs as a game. You're able to move your mouse and your keyboard and just play around with it, like a basic user experience, right? But something has to be delivered. You can't just be on a side project, you're writing code and you've never executed it, you've never packaged it in a form that someone else can run, right? Something that would probably go to a beta tester or whoever, right? That should be the outcome of a side project. It's kind of similar to anyway, that's for the second one. So then the side viable project, right? The outcome should be something that you could market, right? Even if it's or something you could display in a hackathon. That would be a side viable project. So you've been working on it for close to, I don't know, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and you have this prototype, right? That you can actually market and say, hey, there's this new prototype of what I'm trying to do. A good example would be Oculus VR, right? So when Oculus first started, I can't remember his name, the guy who started it, because he's responsible for like the resurgence of VR. He created this thing that he was his side project, right? But he had been working on it for like 6 to 7 weeks. So he had like a prototype where you could just wear it on your head and it could do facial tracking and you could see things in 3D and stuff like that. And yeah, that was what took the world by storm. So when he went to, I think was it CES or I can't remember. It wasn't CES. It was probably South by Southwest, where he went and he demonstrated it, and journalists got to see it, and they were all blown away. Uh, that that is the deliverable of a side viable project. In other words, you have to be able to demonstrate the viability of the thing you're working on. Right? Somebody has to be able to play around with it and say, "Oh, this has potential." Right? Then for side business, it has to be in the hands of a consumer. So the deliverable for side business is I made $1 from one customer. Then you have delivered the side business, right? Um,
Partially
yeah.
disagree.
Okay.
The
uh,
deliverable of
okay.
a side project is social proof. If we're talking
Okay.
about earning a lifestyle, if we're talking about separating yourself from the herd to be an outlier, if we're talking about being marketable, it requires more than publishing an executable. It requires, when I Google your name, the first page is your professional practice, meaning that your side project, I would argue, and people will disagree with me, but what I'm saying is your side project should be an ecosystem of Stack Overflow questions, Stack Overflow answers, technical blog posts, even if they're just brain dumps of what you learned. Um, in addition to something on GitHub or some asset that was the primary deliverable. This is killing multiple birds with one stone. This is documenting your journey. This is documenting your experience. This is helpful to other people that are working on something similar that may have been going down a path that in your Stack Overflow question or answer or your technical blog post, you said, my experience has told me that this does not work. This is why, and this is an alternative way to satisfy the objective. Blah, 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 blah. That's the best use of someone's time when working on a side project to
Hmm.
earn a lifestyle and to be marketable.
I would agree. I think you're right. I think I would agree with that. It's not just enough to have an executable or a prototype that works. You also have to, like you said, have a brain dump, have a documentation around it. And if it didn't work, right, you also have to be able to document why it doesn't work, right? So you may have an idea, but the reason I said executable is that what are you going to write about if you don't know if what you are writing about works or not, right? So that's where my train of thought was heading, was you need to have some form of some form of finish point, right? So it's not enough to just say, oh, I learned Kubernetes and I was able to do this, that, but it has no conclusion, right? There was no, okay, and then it works. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yes, you're right in the sense that that brain dump is still just as valuable. So it's just as valuable as whether or not you even got to the answer in the first place. So yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Here's one question to insert before we start wrapping things up.
Okay.
Is studying for a certification a side project?
No, I don't think that's not a side project. That's just studying for certification, right? Now you could use your certification on a side. You could have a side project that you are working on while studying for your certification, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that still applies. But some people could just study for certification and have zero output, zero of the outputs
Yeah.
we just mentioned,
So
right?
the certification in theory could be the output of your side project. Is your side project is in, a ingredient or a significant input to your certification process, right?
Yeah,
You you do the work, it sticks a whole lot better than reading a book.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else before we start executing the wrap up procedure of this video?
Nothing else. I think we have quite a bit of we have quite a bit of we covered quite a lot.
If I was a junior, I really wish I had this video like maybe 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. I think there's some gold in here. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I'm not gonna go too much on off on a tangent. Let me just say, having a side project and manifesting through demonstration, not declaring this, that, and not doing anything, not a participation award by just saying something, but demonstrating why I'm an Azure architect, why I'm a Xamarin architect, why I'm a test architect. They all started, or the majority of them started from working on a side project.
Mm,
The interesting thing that a lot of people may not believe, and that's fine, is it has usually taken me between 3 to 4 years of saying, in the state of Florida, I am going to be the technical authority of XYZ, whether it's F Sharp, Xamarin, Azure. I'm not the technical authority in the state of Florida on Azure. I'm not. But maybe I'm the technical authority of Azure in Miami Beach, right? And that's a mind hack that I use. Um, Going through the process of finding something that I think is valuable to work on in the mornings and if I could squeeze out the weekends, within 36 months of me making that declaration and demonstrating that I'm on it, whatever declaration that I made, it's catapulted me to be an architect, making architect money,
mm,
right?
mhm.
That do it until you become it. Like I honestly believe I'm a living example of that.
Yep. Yep.
I
Yep.
don't look like what they show on TV and what they show on websites as an architect or anything of that matter, right? Which is kind of, I don't know, different for the people that I preside over. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Like I totally agree with that. The that becoming, manifesting is really how you get to the next level. Like I've always said, right? You don't get promoted because you are you don't get promoted. So it's not like your bosses don't promote you. They don't expect that, oh, when we promote you, you will now be operating on the next level. No, you only get promoted because you are operating on that next level. And how do you operate on that next level is through side projects, right? So
I've been in
if you
organizations that don't work that way, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Like if you are just a junior developer just working on a few projects, right? Doing essentially doing what you're told, you will never get promoted because you're just doing what you're told. But if you have side projects, if you increase your capacity and you start taking on more and more advanced tasks, which may not necessarily be assigned to you, you will start operating on that newer level. And by the time you have those opportunities to demonstrate, like you said, those your ability to operate on that higher level, that's when most employers are like, oh man, we have to promote Scott so that he doesn't leave and become this thing in another company, right? So yeah.
And wrapping up, if you find value in this content of today's program, please share it. Please comment on anything that you would like to add on or discredit, and encourage subscribers. Right. So that's my call to action.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, same here. Please like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts. Give us your feedback. We really appreciate it. All right. Bye.